Do you ever look at the spiraling cost of living, the relentless European housing crisis, and feel a cold, sinking dread that the financial system is quietly engineered to keep you paralyzed? You hustle relentlessly, sacrificing your youth and energy. Yet the dream of true financial independence seems to slip further away with every passing day. This silent fear of economic ruin is a heavy burden, but it does not have to be your permanent reality. If you absorb the cold truths within this narrative, you will uncover the psychological blueprint to navigate any future financial storm. You will learn to turn the ashes of a burning economy into the solid, unshakable foundation of your own untouchable wealth. To master this dark art of financial survival, we must dissect a specific moment in modern history. The catastrophic global market crash of the year 2008. While the world watched ancient banking institutions crumble and millions lost their life savings, one specific demographic reacted with an eerie, almost unnatural calmness. Generation X stood quietly in the absolute center of the financial hurricane, watching the chaos unfold without shedding a single tear. They did not riot in the streets, they did not panic, and they did not beg for salvation from a system they already knew was entirely broken. Their stoicism was not a result of ignorance, but a calculated armor forged from decades of quiet, persistent disillusionment. You must deeply understand that this generation was born into a world that never promised them safety or stability. They were the original Latchkey kids, returning daily to empty houses and learning to manage their own survival long before they reached adulthood. They grew up under the heavy shadow of the Cold War, where the threat of total global annihilation was a casual, everyday topic on the evening news. This harsh environment violently stripped away their youthful optimism, leaving behind a profound sense of fierce independence and a deep distrust of authority. When the economic foundations finally cracked in 2008, they were merely witnessing a harsh reality they had anticipated their entire lives. Their absolute immunity to panic was also heavily reinforced by a previous financial slaughter that the world often forgets. By the time the housing bubble burst, Generation X had already survived the brutal dot-com crash of the year 2000. They had watched their very first investment portfolios evaporate overnight, learning the hard way that corporate promises and digital gold rushes were largely manipulative illusions. That early, devastating exposure to absolute market destruction served as a brutal, yet necessary financial vaccine. Therefore, the subsequent crash 8 years later felt less like a shocking betrayal, and more like a highly predictable sequel to a tragedy they had already endured. During the darkest, most terrifying months of 2008, the mainstream financial media operated on pure, unadulterated hysteria. Anchors screamed daily about the inevitable end of capitalism, while massive retirement accounts bled out on the trading floor. Yet, the typical Generation X investor simply stopped looking at their glowing screens, accepting the brutal reality without a shred of emotional attachment. They understood a fundamental Machiavellian truth, which dictates that panic always serves the predator, while infinite patience serves the strategist. Instead of liquidating their assets at the absolute bottom of the market, they held their ground with a cold, almost detached discipline. While older generations desperately tried to salvage their collapsing funds, this quiet generation engaged in cold, predatory calculation. They realized quickly that the housing collapse was not merely a global tragedy, but a massive liquidation sale of the world's most valuable assets. With their characteristic coldness, those who had strategically preserved their capital began to aggressively acquire undervalued properties and discarded stocks. They did not buy out of blind, foolish optimism, but out of a ruthless, mathematical understanding of historical economic cycles. They stepped calmly into the blood in the streets, knowing that true generational wealth is always transferred during moments of maximum public despair. This is the absolute, vital lesson you must extract from their psychological resilience and apply to your own life today. Emotion is the ultimate enemy of wealth creation, and fear is the invisible, heavy tax levied upon the uninformed masses. When the crowd is screaming and rushing blindly for the exits, the controlled mind sees a landscape rich with unprecedented opportunity. This generation survived because they viewed the economy not as a nurturing entity, but as a ruthless machine operating on highly predictable cycles of extreme greed and extreme fear. They accepted the agonizing pain of the present moment, knowing mathematically that markets eventually, and inevitably, reward those who can simply endure. Look closely at the current economic landscape, where rising energy costs and silent inflation are slowly suffocating the working class. The panic and anxiety you feel today is identical to the fear engineered by the system in 2008. But if you choose to adopt the fortified mind of a cynical survivor, you will immediately stop complaining about the inherent unfairness of the game. You will start actively looking for the hidden cracks in the foundation. The quiet avenues where money is flowing while everyone else is distracted by the noise. This is exactly how you reclaim your ultimate power, by observing the daily chaos from a high pedestal of absolute emotional control. True power will always belong to those who can maintain their total silence while the rest of the world descends into madness. You must begin to build your financial fortress brick by brick, trusting in cold strategy rather than relying on desperate hope. Remember always that the market does not care about your personal fears, your daily struggles, or your desperate need for a lucky break. It only respects unwavering discipline, unyielding patience, and the cold, piercing logic of the prepared mind. Take absolute control of your perception today, and you will flawlessly master the reality of your financial tomorrow.